All right, so let's talk a little bit about motor development. Motor development, remember we talked about the motor strip in Chapter 2. Motor means, voluntary movement. And you see in babies that they go through a very predictable sequence of motor skill acquisition. Around 6 months of age, they start to sit unsupported. For most babies, somewhere thereafter, they'll start to crawl. Somewhere around a year of age, most babies will start to walk. And starting to walk usually involves holding on to something. We call it cruising. They might need to hold someone's hand or walk along the coffee table, something like that. By 15 months, it's pretty typical or average for babies to be walking independently. Like I was mentioning in the last segment about trying to enrich our baby's environment, some people think that we can rush these motor skill development. You really can't. Babies will typically develop these skills at the rate that they're sort of pre-designed to develop them. Now you can sort of slow them down by, for example, Native Americans used to keep their babies on backboards, and even when they weren't moving around, the adults weren't moving around and needing to carry the babies, they would hang the babies from hang the backboards on the wall of the teepee or inside the longhouse. So the baby was safe up off the dirt, stuff like that. Those babies they crawled later, and some of them didn't crawl at all. But everything else would progress as normal. They didn't walk later. It's like the adults knew when it was time to start letting them out of the cradle board in order to start getting some movement. And they walked at the same time other babies who were allowed free crawl time did. There's nothing special about crawling that does something to the brain. When my children were little, at least, there were these classes that would try and get babies to go through some of the same movements that are involved in crawling, because it was supposed to be preserve specific things in the brain. I'm like, who taught you guys this? There's no evidence that your brain gets somehow properly formed if it crawls and improperly formed if it doesn't crawl. Some babies never formally crawl on hands and knees. Some do more of a scoot. Some do a bear crawl. Some go from sitting to walking, cruising around, holding somebody's hand. Babies have different trajectories that they follow, and there's no reason why you have to go back and crawl or revisit an earlier stage that you skipped. There's no evidence to support that. There's absolutely no evidence to support that you can speed up acquisition of these skills either. When my daughter was 12 months old, I was visiting a friend whose mom insisted that all babies should be walking by 12 months of age, and she spent the entire 3 days that we were visiting hunched over, holding both of my daughter's little hands and making her walk everywhere rather than crawl everywhere. We went home and my daughter started walking at 15 months. I mean, that's just what she was pre-programmed to do. It doesn't matter if you spend a weekend with somebody making you walk. You will walk when you're ready to walk. Meanwhile, my son, who I didn't spend a second doing that with, was walking at 9 months. I mean, everybody has their time. Everybody has their trajectory. He crawled. He did his time crawling, but he walked earlier. Everybody has their trajectory, and you really can't speed it up. You can slow it down a little bit, but given the opportunity, babies tend to catch up. So it's usually all very transitory. It only feels really bad when you're sitting around with the other moms asking, is yours crawling yet, and stuff like that. Everybody sort of develops at their own trajectory. Now, what about older age? I'm kind of going a little bit out of order compared to our textbook. Our textbook goes by age group, and I'm going to kind of just go by topic. So motor development, we're acquiring our motor skills in infancy, and then, you kind of peak in your motor skills by about, I don't know, for women, for girls, it's going to be somewhere around 13, 14. For guys, it's going to be somewhere more like 16, 17. And then we have pretty much homeostasis until, I don't know, 40s or 50s. You really don't see changes or deterioration in motor skills until after about age 80 in most people. After the age of 80, we are able to noticeably detect that people have become slower, especially when they're doing complex tasks, moving a series of buttons or playing a video game that requires tracking of information plus responding, stuff like that. The thing is, adults can maintain a lot of their motor capabilities if they maintain physical exercise. A lot of you who are listening to me have older relatives who are, baby boomer age or maybe slightly older than that, who maybe are in their 70s, 60s, and that's a generation, the group of people who really have stuck with physical exercise and are really providing evidence that maintaining physical exercise throughout adulthood can really help not only with motor capabilities but also cognitive abilities. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Motor development also benefits from different kinds of challenging tasks. Here's an older woman playing, what is that game called? Bridge. I kept coming up with canasta because that's what my grandma used to play. She and her sisters and my great-grandma loved canasta, and we would play that at holidays. But this is actually bridge that she's playing. Researchers have examined those elderly people who play these kinds of complex card games that have the quintessential combination of skill sets: complex rules, social aspects, and competitiveness. Those things all together seem to provide exactly the perfect storm of things that help older people to stay cognitively and motor skill at the best functioning that they can have given their advanced age. So younger people, which I assume most of you are less than 80 who are listening to this lecture, younger people who engage in these kinds of activities can really maintain their skills well into older adulthood. All right, let's go ahead and take a little break. That may have been a shorter lecture than usual, but I want to put cognitive development all into one big lecture. So let's go ahead and stop here, and we'll come back and talk about cognitive development next.